Why do some criminals fall instantly, while others dine with politicians, walk through courtrooms untouched, and die peacefully in luxury? Why does the same society that punishes a thief mercilessly suddenly grow silent when the thief was astute, owns a corporation, or funds an election? Tonight, we are not discussing crime. We are dissecting protection. We are solving the deeper problem: why power shield the guilty, and why people allow it. If you have ever wondered why justice feels selective, if you have sensed that truth bends around influence, this is a mechanism behind it. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Power redefines morality. Morality is often presented as something sacred and immovable, as if it descends from the heavens untouched by human hands. People are taught to believe that right and wrong exist independently of status, wealth, or influence. Yet reality exposes a harsher truth. Morality is fragile in the presence of power. It bends, it adapts, it negotiates. When a powerless man commits a crime, his action is isolated from context. It is judged plainly, stripped of justification. His motives are irrelevant. His punishment is swift. But when a powerful individual commits a similar act, the world suddenly demands nuance. There are discussions, panels, investigations, reinterpretations. The crime is no longer a crime. It becomes a misunderstanding, a strategic miscalculation, an unfortunate error in judgment. Power does not erase wrongdoing. It redefines it. The reason is psychological. Human beings instinctively associate authority with legitimacy. When someone rises to prominence, whether through wealth, political influence, or institutional rank, people unconsciously assume competence and superiority. This assumption reshapes perception. If such a person commits a questionable act, the mind struggles to reconcile it. He must have had a reason. There must be information we don't know. Doubt is redirected away from the powerful and toward the accusation itself. Power generates narrative control. The influential individual surrounds himself with interpreters, lawyers who dissect language, media allies who soften headlines, institutions that issue carefully crafted statements. Language becomes a battlefield where morality is rewritten. Theft becomes financial irregularity. Exploitation becomes aggressive negotiation. Deception becomes strategic communication. Words dilute impact. Most people do not analyze actions directly. They analyze descriptions of actions. And when descriptions are polished, the moral reaction weakens. Outrage requires clarity. Confusion neutralizes it. Time plays its silent role as well. The powerful understand delay better than the weak. Investigations stretch. Procedures extend. Attention shifts. The public, overwhelmed by constant information, moves on. Memory fades faster than injustice resolves. What would have destroyed a powerless individual in days becomes a years-long debate when power intervenes. The crowd's anger is intense but brief. Power's patience is endless. There is also the phenomenon of moral hierarchy. Society unconsciously ranks individuals. Those at the top are perceived as more valuable, not only economically, but symbolically. They are tied to stability, jobs, markets, political order. When they fall, systems tremble. Because of this, many people prefer to reinterpret their crimes rather than risk systemic disruption. Justice becomes secondary to stability. Thus, morality shifts from principle to calculation. Instead of asking, "Was this wrong?" society asks, "What will happen if we treat this as wrong?" If punishment threatens economic collapse, political scandal, or social unrest, then reinterpretation becomes attractive. It feels responsible. It feels pragmatic. But pragmatism slowly erodes integrity. Another psychological element is aspiration. Many individuals secretly desire proximity to power. To condemn the powerful too strongly risks social exclusion. It risks closing doors. So criticism is softened. Silence becomes strategic. Even those who recognize wrongdoing hesitate because power is magnetic. It promises opportunity. The moral judgment of the crowd is therefore influenced not only by fear but by ambition. Furthermore, authority creates psychological distance. The crimes of the powerful are often abstract: financial manipulation, policy exploitation, systemic corruption. These lack the visceral clarity of street-level crime. A stolen wallet is concrete. A manipulated market is conceptual. The human mind reacts more strongly to visible harm than to dispersed consequences. The powerful benefit from abstraction. When harm is distributed across thousands or millions, responsibility feels diluted. Each individual impact appears small. The emotional intensity decreases. The moral verdict softens. Over time, this repeated softening reshapes collective standards. What once would have been scandalous becomes normal. What once demanded resignation becomes survivable. Power gradually expands the boundaries of acceptable behavior, and society adjusts. The most dangerous aspect of this transformation is that it rarely feels dramatic. There is no sudden collapse of morality. There is only gradual accommodation. Each exception sets precedent. Each reinterpretation lowers resistance. Each delay numbs reaction. In the end, morality does not disappear. It simply becomes selective. The weak are judged by rules. The powerful are judged by outcomes. And outcomes, unlike rules, are negotiable. The psychology of collective blindness. There is a peculiar phenomenon in society. People often see, yet refuse to acknowledge what they see. This is not ignorance in the ordinary sense. It is not a lack of information. It is a deliberate softening of perception, a subtle turning away from uncomfortable truths. Collective blindness is not the absence of evidence. It is a refusal to let evidence disturb psychological comfort. When powerful individuals are accused of wrongdoing, the facts rarely vanish. They circulate. They are discussed in fragments, hinted at in headlines, whispered in conversations. And yet, the general reaction is hesitation rather than conviction. The public pauses. It waits. It doubts not the accused, but the clarity of its own perception. This hesitation arises from an inner conflict. On one side stands moral intuition, the quiet voice that recognizes injustice. On the other side stands the need for stability, order, and belief in institutions. To admit that a powerful figure is corrupt is to admit that the system itself is vulnerable, and that realization unsettles the human mind. Most people depend on structures larger than themselves: governments, corporations, courts, financial systems. These structures provide not only material security, but psychological reassurance. They represent predictability. If those at the top are deeply corrupt, then the structure may be fundamentally flawed. That thought threatens one's sense of safety. So the mind searches for alternatives. It invents explanations that preserve faith in the system. It's probably exaggerated. There must be more context. If it was serious, authorities would act. These statements are not objective evaluations. They are emotional defenses. The crowd does not protect the powerful because it admires them. It protects them because confronting them would demand inner disruption. There is also the burden of responsibility. If injustice is acknowledged, then silence becomes complicity. But complicity is easier to bear when the injustice is uncertain. Doubt becomes a refuge. By remaining unsure, the individual avoids moral obligation. Uncertainty permits inaction. Collective blindness thrives in complexity. The more complicated the situation, the easier it is to retreat into confusion. Legal jargon, political maneuvering, economic data, these overwhelm the average person. Faced with complexity, many surrender judgment entirely. They defer to experts, to commentators, to institutions that may themselves be compromised. Thus, blindness spreads not because people are incapable of thinking, but because they are fatigued by thinking. There is another element: social conformity. Humans are deeply influenced by group perception. When the majority appears calm, outrage feels excessive. When prominent voices downplay accusations, individuals mirror that tone. No one wishes to appear irrational, extreme, or naive. If friends, colleagues, and media figures treat a scandal as trivial, dissent becomes socially costly. The individual senses that strong moral condemnation may lead to isolation, and isolation is one of the deepest fears embedded in human psychology. So silence becomes communal, doubt becomes fashionable, skepticism is redirected, not toward the powerful, but toward the accusers. Collective blindness is reinforced by gradual exposure. When minor scandals are repeatedly tolerated, sensitivity diminishes. Each incident lowers the threshold of shock. What once would have been intolerable becomes merely disappointing. Over time, disappointment transforms into expectation. People begin to assume corruption is normal, but not urgent. It becomes background noise. The mind also employs comparison as a coping mechanism. When confronted with powerful wrongdoing, individuals often say, "Others have done worse." This relative reasoning dilutes outrage. Instead of evaluating an act on its own merit, it is measured against greater evils. By this method, almost any misconduct can be minimized. There is comfort in minimization. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of collective blindness is that it often coexists with private awareness. Many individuals suspect the truth. They sense the imbalance, but they compartmentalize it. They discuss it quietly, then return to routine. Daily life resumes. Bills must be paid. Careers must advance. The urgency of survival overshadows the discomfort of injustice. In this way, society sustains what it quietly questions. Blindness, therefore, is not darkness. It is dimmed light, enough visibility to maintain plausibility, but not enough clarity to ignite revolt. It is a psychological compromise between truth and comfort. And as long as comfort remains more valuable than moral clarity, collective blindness will continue to shield those who understand how to exploit it. Fear as a tool of silence. Fear is rarely loud when it serves power effectively. It does not always appear in the form of threats, violence, or visible oppression. Its most efficient form is quiet, rational, and disguised as prudence. It whispers calculations into the human mind. What will this cost you? What might you lose? Is it worth it? Protected criminals understand something fundamental about human nature. Most people are not governed by morality alone. They are governed by survival. And survival is not limited to physical safety. It includes status, income, reputation, belonging, and opportunity. When these are placed at risk, even principled individuals hesitate. The powerful do not need to silence everyone directly. They construct environments where speaking becomes dangerous and silence becomes logical. A journalist knows that exposing certain figures may cost access to elite circles. A politician knows that confrontation may dry up funding. A business partner knows that dissent may terminate contracts. Each person calculates privately. Each decision appears personal. Yet together they form a web of collective restraint. Fear works best when it is indirect. Direct intimidation creates martyrs. Indirect consequences create compliance. A promotion quietly denied. A contract subtly withdrawn. A reputation slowly questioned. These are not dramatic punishments. They are adjustments. But they send a clear message. Opposition carries weight. Over time, individuals internalize this message. They begin to censor themselves before anyone else needs to intervene. This is the highest efficiency of power, when external control becomes internal discipline. Fear also thrives on ambiguity. When consequences are unpredictable, imagination magnifies them. If one whistleblower is publicly destroyed, many others conclude that silence is wisdom. They do not need to be threatened personally. The example is enough. Human beings are deeply sensitive to social risk. Exile from one professional or social group can feel like annihilation. Our ancestors survived through belonging. Exclusion meant vulnerability. That instinct remains. To challenge powerful figures often means standing alone, and loneliness is a formidable deterrent. Fear binds itself to dependency. Institutions create networks of reliance, financial, social, political. When a powerful criminal occupies the center of such a network, many individuals become entangled in his stability. Their livelihoods connect to his reputation. If he falls, they fall with him. Thus, protection becomes self-preservation. It is not loyalty in the romantic sense. It is calculation disguised as solidarity. Employees defend the organization because their income depends on it. Allies defend the leader because their influence depends on proximity. Even critics may soften their tone if their access depends on maintaining relations. The system becomes self-protective. Another dimension of fear lies in uncertainty about victory. Many remain silent because they believe resistance will fail. Power appears immovable. Resources seem limitless. Legal teams, media influence, political allies. These create an aura of invincibility. When success seems unlikely, courage appears irrational. People ask themselves, why sacrifice everything for a battle I cannot win? In this way, fear does not need to be overwhelming. It only needs to tilt the balance slightly toward caution. There is also the fear of complexity. Exposing powerful wrongdoing is rarely simple. It involves documentation, legal battles, public scrutiny, relentless pressure. The path is exhausting. The powerful can afford long wars. Ordinary individuals cannot. Time itself becomes a weapon. Legal processes stretch for years. Costs accumulate. Stress multiplies. The powerful rely on endurance, knowing that most challenges will eventually retreat under the weight of sustained pressure. Fear operates not as a single blow, but as continuous tension. Furthermore, fear blends with self-doubt. The individual who witnesses wrongdoing may question perception. Perhaps I'm misunderstood. Perhaps I lack the full context. Perhaps others know better. This doubt weakens resolve before confrontation even begins. When doubt and fear merge, silence feels justified. The protected criminal thrives in this atmosphere. He does not always issue commands. He cultivates climate. He ensures that enough people have something to lose. He ensures that consequences are visible but not always traceable. He ensures that opposition feels isolated. And so, silence spreads, not because truth is absent, but because fear quietly rearranges priorities within the human mind, elevating safety above justice, calculation above conscience, preservation above principle. The inner weakness that sustains corruption. It is tempting to believe that corruption survives because the corrupt are exceptionally strong. This belief comforts the conscience. It allows the individual to think, I am powerless before such forces. But corruption does not endure merely because the powerful are cunning. It endures because ordinary weaknesses quietly cooperate with it. The architecture of protection is not built only from wealth or influence. It is reinforced by envy, ambition, cowardice, and the subtle hunger for proximity to authority. These traits exist in varying degrees within most individuals. The protected criminal does not create them. He exploits them. Envy is one of the most underestimated forces in social dynamics. When a powerful figure falls under accusation, many outwardly condemn him. Yet inwardly, some are fascinated. They observe his freedom from consequences with a mixture of resentment and admiration. There is something darkly captivating about a person who appears untouchable. He embodies a forbidden fantasy, power without restraint. This secret admiration weakens moral outrage. It transforms condemnation into spectacle. Instead of demanding justice, people watch. They analyze. They gossip. The scandal becomes entertainment rather than a call to action. Ambition contributes more quietly. In hierarchical societies, access to influence determines opportunity. Those who aspire upward are cautious about whom they oppose. Criticizing powerful figures may close doors permanently. Remaining neutral preserves possibility. Silence becomes strategy. Ambition does not need to be grand. Even modest desires, to maintain status, to secure promotion, to avoid stagnation, encourage restraint. Individuals measure risk against reward. If challenging corruption offers little personal gain and high potential loss, most choose discretion. Cowardice, though harshly named, often disguises itself as realism. The individual tells himself that resistance is futile, that systems are too entrenched, that nothing will change. This rationalization softens the sting of inaction. It transforms fear into practicality. But practicality accumulates consequences. Each time a person chooses safety over principle, the structure of corruption grows slightly stronger. Not dramatically, not visibly, but incrementally. The powerful rely on this gradual reinforcement. They do not need unanimous support. They require only enough passive cooperation. Another inner weakness is a desire for belonging. Humans seek alignment with dominant forces. To stand apart requires emotional resilience that many have not cultivated. The majority prefer to align with prevailing sentiment, even when that sentiment is shaped by influence. If the social environment signals tolerance toward a powerful offender, dissent feels deviant. The individual risks ridicule or marginalization, and marginalization threatens identity. Most people derive part of their self-worth from group acceptance. To jeopardize that acceptance for abstract justice feels disproportionate. There's also intellectual vanity. Some convince themselves that they see complexities others do not. They argue that morality is nuanced, that situations are layered, that judgment requires caution. While nuance can be virtuous, it can also become a refuge from clarity. Excessive analysis delays moral decision. It creates endless gray areas where decisive action dissolves. Corruption flourishes in gray zones. Self-interest plays a fundamental role as well. Even those not directly connected to power may benefit indirectly from its stability. Economic growth, institutional reputation, social order, all can appear tied to influential figures. The individual fears that exposing wrongdoing might destabilize these benefits. He tells himself that preserving the system serves the greater good. Thus, compromise appears noble. Over time, repeated compromise reshapes character. What was once uncomfortable becomes tolerable. What was once intolerable becomes normal. The conscience adapts. It lowers its expectations. It learns to coexist with contradiction. The protected criminal senses this adaptation. He understands that public resistance has limits. He knows that outrage fades when it demands sustained sacrifice. He relies on fatigue, distraction, and the endless cycle of new controversies to dilute focus. But beneath these external strategies lies a deeper truth. Corruption persists because confronting it requires individuals to confront themselves. It demands that they question their ambitions, their fears, their attachments, and their willingness to endure loss of principle. Few are eager for such examination. It is easier to condemn abstract injustice than to risk personal discomfort. It is easier to criticize from a distance than to step forward and endure consequence. The inner weakness that sustains corruption is not dramatic villainy. It is ordinary hesitation magnified across millions of lives. When multiplied, hesitation becomes culture. When culture normalizes accommodation, corruption ceases to appear extraordinary. It becomes woven into expectation. And so the protected criminal is not sustained solely by his own strength, but by the quiet, cumulative surrender of those who convince themselves that survival is wisdom, that proximity is opportunity, and that silence is harmless.